Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Dr. Garais, your professor for MED210 Anatomy and Physiology. It is now week 9, and we're in a 10-week cycle, so week 10 is our last week. And this week, we're going to go over the reproductive system with a focus on the female reproductive system versus the male. So these are good videos, nice videos. You have your chapter, and mitosis and meiosis come back again. And this is a good video regarding hereditary things. So female reproductive system and structure and function versus male. So let's go over female reproduction. So of course the function for both systems is to for propagation of life. So the first thing you have to look at is, let's look at the parts. And the video also does this as well. And there are two views. You see this view, and this is the also the a classic view. Now, of course, you have your ovaries, your fallopian tubes. They're bilateral on both sides. All of this is supported by this here, which is called the broad ligament. And if you'll also notice that the uterus, there is like a slimming down here, and that's called your cervix. And this is the body, also known as your corpus. And this top part is the fundus of your uterus. And that is clinically important because that's the area that we measure, when baby is growing. So the implantation of sperm has to be in the upper anterior corpus for it to be a viable pregnancy. If it's in any other of these spaces or the vaginal canal, then there's going to be an ectopic pregnancy, and that's not a good thing. You could also see here the cervix. You have its internal os, that's OS, or opening. You have your external os, and then you have the vaginal wall here. You'll see there are folds in the vaginal wall that also, just like functions of the rugae in your stomach for expansion, again, to accommodate the baby. Now, your endometrium, right, which is the inner portion of your uterus, is the innermost layer. Then you have the myometrium, which is the majority of the uterus. And then you have the perimetrium, which is the outer covering. Now, the important part of the endometrium is the implantation of, of baby. And the myometrium is the forcible expulsion of the products of gestation, which is when it's time for baby to go down, right? So and that's why during the monthly menstrual cramping and menstrual cycle, that's where the cramping comes from. It's from here, the active contraction of the muscle layer, or the myometrium of your uterus. Of course, of your meaning female patient. This is another view. You see here the vaginal canal, and then you see the uterus, how it's actually shaped. And you could see, even also with the curvature of the spine, that everything is to facilitate baby going through. Now, there's a pathology where you have retroversion, or the os and the cervix is pointing the wrong way. Just imagine if this is pointing up and to the back, baby won't be able to get out. But when it comes time, all of this and this loosens up, and everything dilates, right? And this is what they talk about, dilatation. 10 centimeters of the dilatation of your cervix. That means baby's fully effaced, meaning it's time for baby. You could also see here where we can also utilize the rectum to evaluate this back part here. This, they call this a cul-de-sac here, and there could be items in there, tumors, or there could be malformations here. So that's also the reason why on there's for obstetric bimanual palpation, or we have to physically probe here with a finger and here as well to see some of these inner anatomy as well. Okay, you could also see why you have a lot of bladder effects when there's baby, because just imagine this is starting to grow. What's going to happen? It's going to push on the bladder, and then what? And then your patient will have some incontinence. All right, so those are the major parts of female reproduction. Let us now, I was doing some bib me stuff. Let us now look at, and I don't want to be redundant regarding some of the videos. Let's see, female heredity, and let's go over. I'm just making sure if you guys, because one of the big things with female reproduction is menstrual cycle, and if there's a video on it. No, they do mitosis and meiosis. Well and good. And of course, the case study for the week, wash, rinse, and repeat. You guys know how to do that. And let's see. Yeah, again, it's more, again, parts 1, 2, and 3. Just answer the questions. They're very straightforward. And it's more on heredity. But I want to talk about something that's a little bit more clinical regarding female female anatomy, which is the menstrual cycle. And this comes out a lot in your future NCLEX examinations, and also relates to your endocrine. So let us look at, which is the picture that I always look at. I think it's this one. Now, let's make it a little larger if I can. Okay. I guess that's the... Now, you could look at the menstrual cycle. Now, the menstrual cycle is 28, is considered 28 days. Now, that's an average. Like, it could be 30, it could be 40. No matter what and it could change from month to month. Everyone knows this. But for... in science and medical science, we look at the cycle in a 28-day cycle. So let's look at it with respect to the ovaries. Now, your ovary, you see this little thing here? It's a follicle, right? Within the follicle is a mature egg, which, of course, from your other videos, you know, only has 23 chromosomes. In order to make a full-blown human being, you need 46. So you have to have one egg from mommy, one sperm from daddy. But for mommy, of course, the egg is only, and the growing follicle during the first 14 days, what's happening? It's growing to become a mature Graafian follicle. And then on the 14th day of a 28-day cycle, there's ovulation. Now, after the ovulation, see this? This part that was feeding and nurturing the single ovum or the single egg turns into corpus luteum. And corpus means body, and luteum, I believe, I think this has something to do with white, or, well, definitely the corpus albicans is definitely the color white. So it starts, all this stuff starts fading away during the second half of the cycle. And remember, it's a cycle, and it starts all over again after 28 days. So the important part of the ovarian part is, the first part is what? The follicle is growing. Then ovulation around day 14. And then after that, all the rest of the other parts get recycled. Now, what's happening? During that time, if you go through this part, you have LH and FSH, follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Right around day 14, day 13, which is the middle of a 28-day cycle, these two, FSH and LH, these two hormones signal ovulation. So it signals the release of that one mature egg from this mature Graafian follicle. Okay? Now, with this increase of LH and FSH, which only happens in ovulation, right? The body temperature will also spike a couple of degrees, and that's called your basal body temperature. And that's the reason why, if you want to kind of avoid being pregnant, or if you want to try to get pregnant, you try to have sexual activity on or around the time of ovulation, because then there'll be a mature ovum present. Okay, and that's why you go to CVS or Walgreens. They sell those basal body temperature things, and there's apps for it now, so that it reminds you, like, hey, this is around the time you get pregnant. And know that if you're doing the rhythm method, you're trying to avoid being pregnant. It's 48 hours plus or minus. So keep away from your partner around day 12 through day 16 of a typical 28-day cycle. But if you don't have an exact 28-day cycle, just wear condoms or do other methods, because the rhythm method is not, of course, 100%. And if you could see here, it matches up to FSH and LH surge. Now, of course, we talked about the growing follicle. So the first 14 days has to be the follicular phase, and the last 14 days, or the second half, has to be called the luteal phase. What happens to those cycles? You could see here estradiol, or estrogen, right? Which estradiol is an estrogen derivative. They peak, and then it bottoms out right around ovulation. And then after that, who then gets increased? Progesterone. If you are pregnant, the estradiol doesn't go back up. It stays low. And the progesterone keeps on going. Now, do you see how there's a decrease in progesterone? This here, the ovarian hormones, this is, and the FSH, LH are anterior pituitary hormones. The ovarian hormones come from your ovaries, right? And this is why you need your ovaries to get pregnant, not only to make the mature egg, but to also release estradiol and progesterone. Now, progesterone, I always think pro pregnancy. So that's the second half, or the luteal phase. Now, what kind of questions could come out? Oh, on day 10 of the cycle, do you have a mature Graafian follicle? No, I do not. What happens? Well, it goes day 14. That's when I get ovulation. When does the FSH LH surge happens? Day 14 goes. When does estradiol increase? During the follicular phase, the first 14 days. When does it decrease? Right after ovulation. What replaces estradiol? Progesterone. Which, by the way, these ovarian hormones, this is exactly how your pregnancy pills work. That's why you can't skip a day, right? Because it's going to mess up the cycle. And what it actually does is increases your progesterone long through the 28th day, so that there won't be any implantation, so your body thinks it's pregnant. Now, when does your menstrual cycle happen? Typically 4 or 5 days of the cycle. That's when you have the sloughing off of your endometrium. That's the inner layer of your uterus. And it makes sense, because if you have no baby, then you don't need any of these arteries and veins. So all that endometrium will get sloughed off. And then it'll slowly build up, right? But if you're pregnant and the progesterone keeps on going, guess what happens to the layer? It keeps on going as well, because you need that fertile, rich arterial environment here for baby. Okay? Now, this is essentially how the menstrual cycle works, and there's a lot, and you can see how easy it is if you know the cycle, and you could look at this, and how easy you can predict on a 28-day cycle. Now, if you have like a 40-day cycle, 35-day cycle, or whatever, but it's relatively consistent, the way you figure out ovulation is you track back 14 days after the last day. So, for example, if you had a 40-day cycle, right, you just minus 40 days minus 14, and so that'd be like what, 26? So your 26th day should be your day of ovulation. Another way you can do it is monitor your your basal body temperature, and then you could figure it out that way as well. Or many times we put patients on the pill, right? Oral contraceptive pill, OCPs, and then they then makes their menstrual cycle very, very regular, and then we could track it. All right, so that's the parts of the female reproductive system that uh, probably wasn't covered because they're heavy into this mitosis versus meiosis stuff. And remember, let's quick review of mitosis, meiosis. Hello, why does it not work? Now, if I look at this, all right, if you look at this nice little chart here, again, this is a nice little chart that I was, mitosis versus meiosis. Let's look. They all have the first four stages of 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 cell division and multiplication, which is the multiplication of the DNA inside. I wonder if I can get closer. Oh, there you go. Right, got to get used to this Mac. So if you look at mitosis, these are somatic cells. All they're doing is they go through prophase, telophase, anaphase. Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, right? They go through but they only go through this once. And what they're producing is carbon copies, or with the next progeny or the next level is daughter cells. So they're copying the DNA, and then there's just splitting. These are somatic cells. That means soma means body. Like if it's a heart cell that has to split, it has to be the same exact cell. And if it's a skin cell, it has to be the same exact cell. So skin cells beget more skin cells, and that's how our body grows and body maintains itself. But in meiosis, they go through the divisions twice. First thing they do is do what? Just what they do in mitosis. They double up all the genetic material, and then they do what? Um, um, they divide. Instead of, like, it would typically make two, these daughter cells, meiosis one, which look like they have like full genetic material, but then they do what? Divide even further. So what do you start off with in both mitosis and meiosis? You start off with 2N, or a full set of genetic material, which is 46 chromosomes. But at the end of mitosis, you end up with 2N, which is the same exact, because you want, in a somatic cell, you want the same exact copy. Now with a germ cell of meiosis, it starts off with 2N, but it ends off with 1N material, which is half the genetic material, which is 23 chromosomes. And these are sperm and ova, right? And you could see how important it was to mix the genetic material more than once, and we're not to make carbon copies as we do in mitosis. But in meiosis is to mix up the genetic material, because if you recall your biology, genetic variation is the key to life. If you keep on having the same genetics, right, like marrying your cousin, that kind of thing, it forms problems. And if you recall your basic biology, it's also the reason why a farmer can't keep doing the same crops in the same ground all the time. It's one of the many reasons. Because if you keep on doing the same crops without mixing up the genetics, you're going to have a problem, right? And that's what this is. So this is the difference between mitosis, meiosis. They also have a very good video of it in your Moodle shells. Now, I feel like separating out male anatomy from female, but heck, let's just do it all together. I'm here. We're all here. We're all friends here. Okay, male reproductive. Now, the male reproductive system isn't as detailed as the female. Here's a classic example. When I went to medical school, um, I had 2 years of just obstetrics, and we spent a lot of time on female anatomy. But in medical school, regarding urology and male anatomy, I think my lecture was like 8 weeks or 7 weeks, something like that. But it's equally important because you can't have babies without, not only without a mommy, but without a daddy. I picked a picture that's kind of simple. So you have your testes, of course, which is there's analogs, and before week 6 or 7, age of gestation, when you were inside mommy's womb, all of us were the same sex. We didn't have one yet. We weren't. Now you look at your genetics, the blueprint of who you are. If you're XX, you'll go down the Mullerian pathway and become female. If you're XY, you go down the Wolffian pathway and you become male. Right? So the testes, which were originally in your abdomen, have to go down. Right? And if you're a male, that's what happens. But if you're a female, the stuff that was supposed to be testes stays in your abdomen and becomes your ovaries. And you know your fallopian tubes, this kind of looks like the vas deferens. So for the male, the analog to the female ovary is the testes, and the analog for the female clitoris is the glans penis, which is the head of your penis right here. Okay, now let's trace the pathway of sperm. Testes, there's sperm production, and it goes in the epididymis, and from the epididymis goes into your vas deferens. Then it goes to here to this kind of gland-like structure, which is your seminal vesicle, and along with your seminal vesicle and your prostate, and your prostate's a gland, and you could see that it goes. There's a connection to your urinary bladder, right here, and that is your male urethra. There's a connection here between that, where the sperm comes out, and where the urine comes out. Now, it's important, the importance of the seminal vesicle and the prostate is that the testes makes sperm, but the sperm need an environment to swim in. And also, it needs a basic environment versus to combat against the relatively acidic environment of the vaginal canal. So that's the importance. And you could see how prostatitis or prostate cancer, if that gets really big here, you're going to not only have problems urinating because it'll block over the bladder, you'll also have problems ejaculating because it'll block over this pathway here, which is the ejaculatory duct connected to your seminal vesicle. Now, the vas deferens here, you'll probably sound familiar to you. That's the one, and of course, there's two of them, since we have testes on two sides, just like we have ovaries on two sides. You also have two vas deferens, and that's the one we perform a vasectomy, ectomy. We cut a piece out, we ligate or tie off the ends so that the sperm can't get through. But you already know that saying, life finds a way. That's why a vasectomy is not 100%. There is a very, very small fraction. It's some ridiculous number like 0.03% that, yes, you could still get somebody pregnant. So urinary bladder, of course, temporary muscular storage of urine, and then it gets big enough, and then urination. Now, the erectile tissue of the penis, there's these cavernous arteries and veins here. And that's the reason why, in order to have a functional erection, of course, remember your autonomic nervous system, there has to be a relatively low blood pressure. That's why I'm always telling my male patients regarding hypertensive or diabetic neuropathy issues. They usually don't pay attention until I start talking about erectile dysfunction. All right, and it has also a lot to do with blood pressure, because this erectile tissue fills up with blood, and that's how you get an erection. And you could also see why, if you see the rectum right here, maybe there's a better picture. See here, you have your bladder and you have your prostate. This is why um, males greater than 35 years of age should get their prostate checked. How do we check it? I can't reach through here. I have to put a gloved, lubricated finger here, and then I'm feeling this area here if there's any prostatitis or any lumps or bumps that shouldn't be there. All right, and I guess that's all I got for the male reproductive and female reproductive. And the other rest of the videos are more on the genetic portions of reproduction. So that's all I have for week 9. Now, what's week 10? Let's look at let's look at week 10 real quick. Week 10 is the end. So, of course, make sure your end of course survey, and also probably by the weekend, your week 10, which is 10% of your grade, I'll be posting a take-home final examination. Okay, and that take-home final examination, once it's posted, you'll have a limited amount of time. I'll probably give you like a day, and again, for every day that it isn't, and I'll try to post it like on Sunday or Monday of week 10. But if it was on the ground, if this was an on the ground class, it would be the day of the class. But for us, I'll and if you need to take it early or have some issues of when you could take it, please give me a call so I can give you alternative assignment, or we can work something out. Again, please don't let zeros stay zeros. And also at the very end, make sure to take your end of course survey. Again, don't just put there, oh, worst teacher in the world, oh, best teacher in the world. We need, if there's, I'm not sure if they modified it to put what do you call that? To put comments. But if you have any comments, whether positive or negative, about my class, and if you want to share them with my chain of command, please do. I'll give you the direct email of Dr. Esadebe, my boss, campus president at Alexandria campus. And again, we use it so we can grow and be better teachers. Okay, I guess that's all that I have. Guys, good luck with your final assessments with all your other classes, and hope to see you on campus soon, one day when all of this is over. Have a good one.